Whiskers was no ordinary cat. He loved tuna, yes, he loved catnip of course. But most of all, Whiskers loved cooking. Yes, you read that right. This fluffy feline was a culinary genius. It all started with a stolen sausage. Whiskers, still a kitten then, snitched it from the kitchen counter. He didn't just eat it though, he batted it around, dipped it in his water bowl, and rolled it in catnip. His human, Mrs. Jenkins, was shocked. "That little scamp is a natural," she declared. And so began Whiskers' culinary journey. He watched Mrs. Jenkins cook every day, perched atop the fridge. He learned about spices and sauces, dough and desserts. He even started requesting specific ingredients by dropping his toy mouse into Mrs. Jenkins's shopping bags. What started as a funny habit turned into a real passion. Whiskers, with Mrs. Jenkins's help, was ready to share his unique talents with the world. Mrs. Jenkins knew just the place, a cozy little storefront on Maple Street. It used to be a bakery, but it had been empty for a while. "Perfect," she said, picturing tiny tables and chairs, just the right size for cats. And they're humans, of course. They painted the walls a warm, inviting yellow. They hung playful cat-themed artwork. And of course, they added plenty of scratching posts and comfy cat beds, because even a chef needs a break. The perfect bistro, as they decided to call it, was ready to welcome its first furry and not-so-furry guests. The menu was a delight. There was the catch-of-the-day platter with fresh salmon and tuna. The catnip cream dream dessert was a big hit. And for the humans, there were delicious sandwiches, salads, and Mrs. Jenkins's famous homemade pies. The grand opening was a huge success. Cats and their humans came from all over town to experience the magic of the perfect bistro. Whiskers took to his role as head chef with gusto. He wore a tiny custom-made chef's hat tilted at a jaunty angle. He patrolled the kitchen, inspecting every ingredient with a critical eye. And when he wasn't supervising, he was busy creating his culinary masterpieces. One day, disaster struck. They ran out of catnip, the key ingredient in their best-selling catnip cream dream dessert. Customers were starting to meow impatiently. Whiskers, never one to disappoint, sprang into action. He dashed out the back door and into Mrs. Jenkins' garden. He returned moments later, a triumphant look on his furry face, carrying a mouthful of freshly picked catnip. Mrs. Jenkins, used to Whiskers' antics by now, simply chuckled and said, "Well, that's one way to solve it." She knew that Whiskers always had a plan, or at least, a very determined look, up his furry sleeve. The garden-fresh catnip cream dream, as they called it that day, was an even bigger hit than usual. Leave it to Chef Whiskers to turn a near disaster into a delicious triumph. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the cozy bistro, Whiskers surveyed his domain. The tables were full of happy customers, both feline and human. The air was filled with the tempting aroma of good food and the sound of contented purrs. He had done it. He, Chef Whiskers, had created a place where everyone felt welcome, where the food was as delightful as a sunbeam nap, and where every day was an adventure in flavor. As he curled up on his favorite cushion near the warm oven, a tiny purr rumbling in his chest. Whiskers knew he wouldn't trade this life for all the catnip in the world. He was a chef, a restaurateur, and most importantly, a cat living his best life, one delicious dish at a time.